Good morning, Rock Church. It's good to see everybody. It's good to see faces. It's good to see more faces. It's good to see faces we haven't seen for a long time. So it's good to see everybody. It's good to have Pastor Bob and his wife here with us this morning. Thanks for coming. Just recently retired as the associate pastor at AJ, First Assembly. But he hasn't retired from ministry. I don't think we ever retire from that. And he's still chaplain at the racetrack. And so I don't think he'll ever give that up until the Lord calls him home. But it's great to have you guys with us here this morning, and glad you can join us. And it's been a good week. We had a great week at Network Conference. We were able to go and spend some time, and it's always a good time when I get to go and be filled myself, right? Because it doesn't happen very often, or I don't get the opportunity just to sit and go to church, right? You know, I come here, yeah, but I don't just get to sit here. I have to do a couple things here and there. But when you go over there, you just sit there and just be fed. It was great, and it was great to hear our secretary, our general treasurer, Choco de Jesus, speak to us and encourage us and lift us up. But it was even more better, even greater, even more better, greater, to see the newly ordained, licensed, and certified ministers get prayed for and established and come out. We had 17 newly ordained ministers over there. We had 3 licensed ministers, and we had 13 certified ministers credentialed. And of those certified, Tim Hamrick and Bethany James, who lead worship at the other campus but have been here a couple times to play, they're both certified ministers too. So it was really great to see that and really get to watch their accomplishments. And it's just good to see all that God's doing in the network and in the district. It's even greater to see what God's doing here in this church. Right, God's doing some great things. We got a lot of things planned. May we're kicking off. We're kicking off, rolling and gunning. We're going forward. Right, we're going to start off our midweek service on Wednesday night. We'll have that starting at 6:30 on the first Wednesday of May. We're going to get going. We'll have some for adults. We'll have some for kids, for youth. We'll have some for everybody. We're also starting a Hope Ministry on Mondays and Tuesdays. Monday evenings at 6:30 and Tuesdays at 9. And Hope is help overcoming painful experiences. And that's going to be led by Pastor Tony and Pastor McKenzie. And some for people, it's not just open to the church, it's open to the community. And there's a network of Hope Ministries that will kind of send people to locations nearest them. And so we're just glad that we could be a location and help be able to people walk through their ministries. And so we're glad to do that. Men's Bible studies. We're starting men's Bible studies on the third Sunday of every month. That'll be at 8 o'clock in the morning. I didn't say men's breakfast because I'm not sure we're going to have a full-out breakfast. We'll have coffee. We'll have some donuts, or we'll have some cake, something like that. But we'll have some good things for the men. And then right after that, on that Saturday, we're going to do Jose's Closet. We haven't been there for a while, but they're back open. They're going to need some help cleaning up because they are moving to a new location, a bigger and better location that they are, but they're going to need some help. So that's going to be right after men's breakfast from 9 to 1. You had a question or had something to say?
Oh, you just said Sundays for the men's Bible study. It's going to be Saturdays.
Saturdays, yes. You only said it once. I didn't say it twice? Okay. So I'm only halfway confused. Just halfway confused. So it's Saturday because Sunday we'll all be in church. So we'll have a Bible study for everybody. But it's just great to see what God's doing. It's great to be able to start to offer these new ministries for people and just begin to start doing some more discipleship here in the church and help us all strengthen and grow in our walk with the Lord. So we're excited about that. Also, if you're new watching online, or if this is your first time here, we want to make contact with you. So you could text hello to 480-660-4558, and we'll be able to reach out to you. If you have any questions for us, you can do that. Or there's also a connection card in front. You can fill that out. Also, if you have prayer requests, any prayer requests, on there's a place on the connection card. Fill out a prayer request, drop it in our offering box over there, and we'll add it to the prayer list. And it's so we can pray for all the needs of this church, and something that we love to do, so we can be a part of that. And then again, make sure you follow us on social media, right? Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, all that fun stuff. We'll see you guys there. Make sure you subscribe, like, leave a thumbs up, click it, share it, do all the other fun stuff we do with all that social media stuff. All right. Now that that's out of the way, how about we get to the Word? while we get to what we came for. Right, we're doing a series on the parables that Jesus taught. Now, parables are just a simple story that has a spiritual truth behind it or moral truth behind it. And I think as humans, we understand a little bit better when we can relate it to things that happen to us all the time, or things that we can see or touch or know that they're happening. Like the first one we talked about was the prayer of a persistent widow, and how she didn't quit, how she didn't give up. And we know that a widow is, she doesn't have much. She lost her husband back in that culture. She didn't have a whole lot of status, but she didn't quit asking the judge to be fair. And because she kept nagging the judge and going after him, she got what was due her. And we apply that to our lives, right? We don't quit praying to God. We don't quit asking Him for things. We don't quit going to Him until He gives us an answer. Sometimes it's no, sometimes it's yes, sometimes it's wait. But we don't ever quit. We be persistent and we keep going after them. Then last week we talked about the wise and the foolish builder, and how we have to have a strong foundation. That strong foundation that's built on God. It's built on a relationship with Him and on word and prayer. And how you're a wise man if you do that. And the foolish man built his house on the sand. And when the storms came, it wiped out his house. But we want to be like the wise man. We want to build on the firm foundation, because we know the storms are coming. Right? In some time or another, storms are coming in our lives. And we want to be able to stand firm on that foundation. And when we're planted strong in the Lord, when we're planted strong in Him, then He'll help us weather the storm. We might come out with a broken window or a little shingles off our roof missing, but we'll stand the test of time. And then God will help us put it all back together. D.L. Moody, an evangelist in the late 1800s, said, "A holy life will make the deepest impression." He also said, "Lighthouse blow no horns, they just shine." Today I want to look at the parable of we are a salt and the light. We are a salt and the light, and it's found in Matthew chapter 5. And this is just given just right after the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus gave the Beatitudes. That He gives this parable about salt and light and says, "You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown and trampled under people's feet." He goes on to say, "You are the light of the world. A city on a hill cannot be hidden, nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven." So Jesus uses two simple little things that we're all familiar with, salt and light, to teach us spiritual truth. Right? We start with salt. Right? Salt has had a big influence in culture, has had a big influence on people throughout time. It's been used since the very beginning of time. Right? It's been used as a preservative. It would help dry out the meats that were there, because back in the days they didn't have the Frigidaire, dual cycle cooler with the freezer on the bottom and the ice dispenser and the touch panel window. Now, right, you have the new Samsung that has that touch panel that's on. It's too smart for me. Right? I just want an icebox to go and just grab my milk and have some cereal. But they didn't even have that back then, so they had to figure out ways how to preserve their meat. So they used salt. Salt dried it out. It dried out. It sucked all the water out of the meat. And nothing can grow in the absence of water. Right? Except I don't know how things grow in the desert, because there's not very much water here, but things still seem to grow. Weeds, you'll get a drop of rain and they'll just sprout like crazy. So, but nothing can grow without water, including bacteria on food that would cause food poisoning. So that was the part of dehydrating the salt and dehydrating the meat and preserving the meat. They put salt on it because bacteria would not grow on that. And it's been used for thousands of years. In Leviticus chapter 2, it says, "You shall season all your grain offerings with salt. You shall not let the salt that the covenant with your God be missing from your grain offering. With all your offerings you shall offer salt." And it was curious right there in the middle part where it says, and go ahead and put that scripture back up if you can, Carl. It says right there in the middle, "You shall not let the salt of the covenant with your God be missing. You should not let the salt of your covenant with God be missing. We are the salt of his covenant. We are the salt that brings flavor to the world, that brings texture to the world, that maybe sometimes we dehydrate people and suck the water out of them. But it says we should not let that be missing from our covenant. From the covenant that God made, even from the very beginning, he had a plan for his people, and he wanted to make sure that it was not missing. How many of you would notice that if you happen to eat some corn tortilla chips, the salt's missing and it doesn't quite taste the same? Right? If anybody's interested, the Safeway down in Mesa, they make their own homemade tortilla chips, and they add just the right amount of salt. They're very good with a little dish of salsa, and you can't go wrong with that. All right, so head on down to Safeway and get those chips and salsa. Or what about French fries? We like French fries without salt. I didn't ask how many have to have French fries without salt. I understand that, but how many like French fries without salt? No, you need French fries on the salt. We need salt on the French fries. Or what about a pretzel? Pretzel with those big grains of salt that when you bite into the soft bread and you crunch on those hard grains of salt, it's just that crunchy softness, chewiness just kind of mixes up, especially when you dip it in mustard. Come on. Salt is important. And I know I'm sorry to make you guys hungry. Maybe we'll just go eat and we'll come back later. But it plays an important part, right, in the taste and how we see food. There's also important roles in our food in essential nutrient values, right? It balances the fluids in our blood. Salt does that. And it helps us maintain a healthy blood pressure, the right amount of salt, right? We can overdo it and go the opposite effect, and I'll talk a little bit more of that in a little bit, but salt, the right amount helps maintain blood pressure. It's essential for nerve and muscle function, right? Salt is needed in our lives. We need it, and there's dozens of uses for salt. And back in the olden days, and even now, today's, right? Every home, every house would at least have salt in it, right? However rich or poor or well off you are, you're usually going to find salt in a house. And during his boyhood, I'm sure Jesus grew up watching his mom or his dad or his aunt or uncle prepare food and use salt, and he understood what it was. He'd watch his mother use salt and prepare the food, so he had an understanding of what that was. So what did Jesus mean when it said, you are the salt of the earth? We are the salt of the earth. What does it mean to be salty? Now, I'm not talking about today's vernacular with the kids when they say, oh, don't be salty. Right? They're talking about being upset or being mad or being angry about something. And why are you all salty about that? Don't get over it. I'm not talking about that, right? I'm talking about the right amount of salt. What does it mean to be the right amount of salt in our communities, in our household, in our church? What does it look like? And to me, I think it looks like just what Jesus was talking about earlier, the passage right before in the Beatitudes and the Sermon on the Mount. To be the salt means to be poor in spirit, to be humble, to be meek, to be mournful, to hunger and thirst after righteousness, to be merciful, to be pure of heart, to be peacemakers. And even though we're persecuted for righteousness, we're going to prevail. That's what being salt is like. That's what being salt in the earth is like, is when we're humble and we care about others and we're concerned for them and we want to do what's best for them. We want to help them in any way we can. And we pray for people. Now, like anything else, there can be too much salt on something. I wonder if I've ever had a dish where you just put a little bit too much salt in there. There's no going back. There's no saving it. You can't scrape off enough salt. You can't add enough pepper to balance it out. There's just too much salt on there. And sometimes as Christians, we can be like that. We can be just a little too salty. We can be just a little too ambitious in how we speak or in how we feel. And what does it do? It turns people off. It leaves a bad taste in their mouth. And we don't want to be that kind of salt. We want to be the kind of salt that enhances the flavor. We want to be the salt that makes everything good and tasty. I watched on the cooking show And they said on there that salt actually brings out the flavor in food. And it's just something that it does when the food that hits your mouth that has a little bit of salt in it, it really brings out the flavor. So try it. Go home, make a steak, right? Barbecue steak with no salt and with salt, and then see which one tastes better. If you need help discovering that, just invite me over. I'll help you. We could discover it together. But we got to be careful not to be too salty. We don't want to offend. We don't want to push away. We want to be just the right amount of salt that brings happiness and joy to people's lives. Salt is an indispensable household commodity. Although, like I said, the function of salt can be negative, the actual function. If you ever get salt in a cut, how does that feel? Ooh, no, not very good, right? And then eating too much salt, right? It can contribute to high blood pressure, and it's linked to heart failure or heart attack, to kidney problems, to fluid retention, to all kinds of different things. So we got to be moderate, and we got to watch out what we're doing with salt. See, salt can be good. It can have positive effects, and salt can have negative effects. Being the salt of the earth, we can have positive effects in our community, or we can have negative effects in our community. It all depends. It all depends how we choose to put it out there. I don't know about you, but I don't want us to be known as a salty church, the bad kind of salty church. I want to be known as a flavorful church, as a church that leaves a good taste in your mouth. And I think we do that. And we'll discover that on May 23rd when we have our potluck. I knew I was going to roll this in somehow. May 23rd, we're going to have a potluck here. So make sure we all bring our dishes. It's a combination of potluck membership, right? We're going to do a membership class. But we'll see how much salt we put in the food and how good salt or bad salt. So it'll be a test coming up. But the main point of this metaphor is that as Jesus' disciples, we're to prevent moral decay in this world. We're to prevent things from rotting in this world. We're to prevent the community from rotting in this world. We need to be like the salt that preserves the meat. We're here to preserve our community. We're here to be a moral antibiotic that helps bring moral clarity to our community, to our family, to our friends, to our co-workers. We're to be that salt that brings that moralness back. And this means that we have a sanctifying influence on the world. See, 1 Corinthians 7:14 says, for the unbelieving husband is made holy, or sanctified, you can use that same word, because of his wife. And the unbelieving wife is made holy, or sanctified, because of her husband. Otherwise, your children would be unclean, but as it is, they are holy. So now, holy or sanctified in this context doesn't mean that the unbelieving spouse is saved just because of the Christian spouse. That's not what he's saying. It simply means that they're set apart, that unbelieving spouse is set apart because they are influenced day in and day out by the believing spouse. They are influenced by the spouse who's dedicated their life to Christ. They're influenced by that spouse day in and day out. And just by virtue of example, of the way they live out their lives, they're going to be an example of Christ's love to them. They're going to be that example of who Christ is to them. And you can do it without saying a word, just living out your life, being respectful, right? Again, being merciful, being pure of heart, being a peacemaker, being poor in spirit, being meek. When you're all those things to an unbelieving person who's watching all that, they're going to notice something's different. They're going to say, what do you have that I don't have? That's a good kind of salt. We don't want to be the salt that nags and says, you got to go to church. Why are you so mean? Why do you always do that? You don't love me. We don't want to be that kind of salt. We want to be the salt that plays a positive influence and that gives them a good representation of who Christ is. See, the believing spouse acts as sort of a salt in the marriage, and your unbelieving spouse may not want to hear the gospel every day, but there's no way that cannot be affected by the life that you live. And the same with your coworkers or people you come in contact with, your family members. There's no way that they can't not be affected by the life that you live, by being the salt. 1 Peter 3 says, Likewise, wives, be subject to your own husbands, so that even if some do not obey the word, they may be won without a word by the conduct of their wives. When they see you respectful and pure conduct, do not let your adorning be external, the braiding of hair and the putting on of gold jewelry or the clothing you wear, but let your adorning be hidden. Let your adorning be the hidden person of the heart, with the imperishable beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which in God's sight is very precious. For this is how the holy women who hoped in God used to adorn themselves, by submitting to their own husbands, as Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord, and you are her children, if you do good and do not fear anything that is frightening. See, that woman didn't, she let her actions speak for herself. She let her love speak for her. She didn't have to do it all up and put on all the makeup and get all gussied up. But she let her actions speak. And that's what being the salt is, letting our actions speak to those around us. See, church, we don't want to lose our saltiness. To be an effective Christian, we must retain Christ's likeness. We have to stay grounded in Him. We have to stay in relationship with Him. As salt, we've got to retain our saltiness. Because if we, as Christians, become assimilated to non-Christians, contaminated by impurities of the world, then we lose our influence. We'll lose our influence of who we are in this community and what God has called us to be. We'll lose our saltiness. See, the influence of Christians is, and on society depends on us being distinct, not identical. If our life is not different in a righteous way, we have no credibility. We'll lose it all. If you can't back up what you say, no one's going to believe you. If I was to act, totally different behind this pulpit as I do at home, no one's going to believe me. No one's going to respect that. We got to be the same. There's an illustration that happened in history. The French culture of the early 1700s was in the process of decay. The king, let me get a drink. The king, Louis XVI, had a motto: after me, the deluge. Right after me, it's gone. It's all flooded away. It's going to pot. And he was absolutely right in his prophetic voice. That's exactly what happened. Right after that, the France was ripped apart by a French Revolution. He lost his saltiness in his kingdom, and it all fell apart. But just 20 miles across the channel, the English culture had the same rot. Right? Historians have described at length the moral corruption of the English culture. And yet England did not go through a revolution. Why? Why was it spared? Was it the Navy? Was it the suave diplomats, the politicians, or the police force? No, it was none of that. The country was spared because in 1703, a man called John Wesley was born in England. And Wesley was born again, lived out the Beatitudes, and proclaimed the gospel, and the nation was preserved. Wesley was the salt. John Wesley was the salt of that time and spared the nation because he spoke up. He flavored it with Christ's flavor. He didn't give up. So church, we need to be the salt. We need to add flavor to our communities, to our families, to our workplace. Not too much salt, but just the right amount of salt. The second part of that parable talks about the light of the world, where it says, "You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden, Nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that you may see, so that they may see the good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. So that they may see the good works and give glory to you? No, give glory to your Father who is in heaven. Everything that we do gives glory to our Father who is in heaven. Now, Jesus is making this point twice, right? First, he used salt of the earth, and now he's saying light of the world, and they're pretty much the same thing, but just with a slightly different emphasis. See, the function of light is positive. It illuminates the darkness. It gets rid of it. When Jesus spoke of the salt, he was saying that the world is decaying. And when Jesus spoke of the light, he is saying that the world is in darkness. Think of the light of the sun and the moon. Right? The sun produces the light and the moon just reflects it. Jesus is the light of the world. Jesus is the light, and we need to reflect it. We need to reflect it in our community. We need to reflect it where we live, in our workplace. We need to reflect that light. Jesus says that his disciples are the light of the world. And we achieve that light by living out a righteous life. By, first of all, surrendering ourselves to Christ and surrendering to his will. But then that light will shine. It'll affect those around us. The light will shine in the dark places. The light will shine wherever we're at. You ever been where it's really dark? Right? Maybe you might be out camping, right? And it's there's no full moon out at night. It gets pretty dark out there. You might have the light of the campfire right around you, but that only lights up so far. We had a commander who would bring his flashlight. It was like 10,000 candle watt flashlight, and it was like this big, and he had to hold and brace himself. And he turned it on, he heard a hum, boom. But it was shining this beam of light clear across the forest. Right, it would light up, and you could just kind of move in direction, and everything would light up. You would see animals start to run and things like that. But it was bright. It was a bright light that shone very far. What about in a cave? Anybody ever been inside a cave? Doing a little cave tour, and they turn off the lights in the middle of the cave? That's pretty dark. That's very dark. Right? You thought it was dark. You can't even see the hand in front of your place. We did that when we were young adults on the Redwood Forest. We did a cave exploration down there. It was a guided tour. It wasn't really exploration. Make it sound like I'm all exploring caves. No, I was following the trail and the guided tour. And you get to this big cavern, right, where they have those little pointy things that are up and down, right? Those little, stalactites and stalagmites or things like that. And so we're going to turn off the lights and just see how dark it is. And after thinking about it, what if those lights didn't go back on? We'd be in a world of trouble. But they turn off the lights, and this guy had a little G-Shock Casio Indiglo light watch that was on it. His watch was glowing. So it kind of lit up the area right around us, and then he covered it, and it went dark. But just that little bit of light made a big difference, made a huge difference in those around us. Or even at home, right, when the kids were, they weren't that young. It was probably a couple months ago we did this. So we would play like flashlight tag in the house, and we'd turn off all the lights, close all the blinds, shut all the windows and everything. It's usually when Gina's gone on retreat or something like that, it's me and the kids. We tend to do those things. And so, right, we shut off all the lights, and we're playing flashlight tag, but there was a clock on the microwave that just gave off just enough light that I couldn't hide in that spot. So I found some duct tape and put it over the light, covered it, and it was gone, and it was perfect. We could hide anywhere and play in there. But it's amazing just how much a little bit of light makes a difference. It's amazing just how much a little bit of light that we are makes a big difference to those around us. And we don't have to be on the corner preaching at them or hitting them over the head with our Bible or anything like that. We just got to live a life that's honorable to Christ, and they're going to see it. They're going to see it, who we are. Just that little bit of light really shines up the area. Now on the reverse side, right, too much light can get people angry and get them cranky. Like when I walk in at night to bed and Gina's been asleep and I have my flashlight on my phone light on and I look into where I'm going and I kind of hit her in her face and she wakes up, she goes, turn off the light. sorry, right? So sometimes too much light can get people cranky and angry. You don't want to do that. You don't want to wake up your wife angry or cranky. It'll be a long night on the couch sleeping down there. But let that little bit of light just make a difference. And it may not be that you've been called to full-time ministry, right? But Jesus is telling his disciples to let their light shine wherever they are. Right? Let your light shine as a mother. Let your light shine as a father, as a grandfather, as a grandmother, as an aunt or an uncle. Let your light shine in your workplace, in your cubicle or in the lunch area around the water cooler. Let your light shine. Let your light shine in your neighborhood as you say hi to your neighbors or, maybe share with them some cookies around Christmas time or whatever you do. Let your light shine. But what you don't want to do is you don't want to withdraw. You don't want to hide your light. Because when the opportunity comes, we don't want to be cowards and just hold on to our light and save it for ourselves. So we need to fear God more than we fear man. I'm more afraid of what God is going to say than what my neighbor is going to say. I have more respect and more fear for when I stand before God and he's going to say, how come you didn't do this? Than I would if my neighbor says, well, why are you telling me that? Or being, just going up and having that fear of being rejected, or having that fear of being ridiculed, or having that fear of being, chastised or made fun of in your office or in your workplace. You gotta stand strong. You gotta be bold. We gotta fear God more than we fear man. And we gotta use the opportunities that God has given us. Right? He'll give you opportunities. And you don't have to use the opportunities and preach the word or anything like that. Right? If someone asks, how are you doing today? You can say, better than I deserve. And go on and explain to them why. Or if you spill a drink on somebody or they spill a drink on you, you can say, I love grace. Don't worry about it. And you can talk about what grace is. Just those little things that we can say can make a difference in people's lives. Those little things that we say can make a difference and that our light shine even just a little bit in their lives. And light is worthless. It's worthless if it doesn't shine. It does me no good to have a flashlight if I don't have batteries in it to use at night. You got to have batteries. You got to be able to shine that light for it to be useful. Because if we don't let our light shine, if we don't let be the salt and add flavor to where we're at, then Romans 1 happens. And Romans 1:21 says, for although they knew God, they did not honor him as God or gave thanks to him, but they became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Claiming to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man and birds and animals and creepy things. Therefore, God gave them up in their lusts of their hearts to impurity, to the dishonoring of their bodies among themselves, because they exchanged the truth about God for a lie and worshipped and served the creature rather than Creator, who is blessed forever. If we're not the salt, if we're not the light, then that's the future of those around us. They'll be given into their evil desires. They'll be given into their lustful desires. And we don't want that. I don't want that for my family. I don't want that for my co-workers or anybody that I know. See, when the salt is worthless, then the meat rots. It decays. It doesn't do its job. It doesn't help preserve the meat. It might not happen right away, but over time it'll happen. How many of us are Christians by Christians in name only? How many of us don't live it out day in and day out? Right? We're worthless at making any kind of influence in the world. And there's just so much like the world that they've lost their taste they've lost their saltiness. And they're good for nothing. They talk a lot, and they may even criticize other Christians for being too rigid, but their lives are worldly. And they have absolutely no moral influence. They're good for nothing. And there's two extremes, I think, in Christianity today. Is that one is that we try to legalize Christianity by trying to build our kingdom here on earth. Right? We try to set up rules and standards and forget that God's rule is mercy. God's rule is grace. We try to put conditions on salvation where Jesus is the only condition for salvation. We try to say, you got to be saved, believe in Him, and you got to be baptized, and you got to speak in tongues, and you got to give your tithes, you got to go to church. But Jesus said, just believe in me, and you'll be saved. But we try to mess it up. And we claim that we should have it all, right? That as Christians, we should have it all. We should be blessed. You got to be blessed. You should have it all. But the Bible says that if we for what is the profit of man to gain the world and lose his soul? What's it going to profit us? And then secondly, we check out of society and become reclusive. We hide to ourselves. We hide from those around us. We take the salt off the table and put it in the cupboard where no one can use it. Right? If the cupboard's back in the table up on high on the shelf, it's not available to anybody, it does nobody any good. That salt's got to be right in the middle of the dining room table where everybody can reach it, where it can be passed to other people, where we can have influence on them. Because if not, what does the Bible say? It said in our text, it says, it is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet. I don't want to be good for nothing. I don't want to be trampled under people's feet. I want to be able to be the salt, be able to be the light to those around us. We're to be the city on the hill that cannot be hidden. We need to be that light that's seen from so far away that people look to it and want to go towards it. And what we're doing is we're just reflecting who Christ is, who God is in our lives. It's not our light that we produce. It's not our magical light. We're just reflecting who God is in our life. And that's what draws people to them. So the solution is that we focus not on the redeeming culture, but not on redeeming culture, but on the Great Commission. We focus on getting the gospel out. We focus on spreading the light, sharing the salt. That's the mission of the church. And when we forget that, when we forget what the mission of the church is, the church will fail. The church won't last. We've been called to be salt and light in this world. And interesting enough, it's easy for you to say. What happens when people believe the gospel and get saved? Right? They instantly become salt and light. Instantly, they become that salt and that light. And in some cases, they actually change those people around them. Imagine that, changing people around you. Imagine changing your culture around you, the community around you. How great that would be. If we focus on the Great Commission, if we focus on the gospel, if we focus on salvation, then God will produce people who live the Beatitudes, who live like salt and light. But if we focus only on being salt and light, if that's just our own focus and that's just our focus is just to be that salt and light, then we're going to end up becoming a bunch of Pharisees or self-righteous people because we're the salt and we're the light. Can't focus on that. So I say, don't worry about being the salt or the light. Just live the Christian life. Be a follower. Be a disciple of Jesus. Live for Him. And it'll happen. The salt will come out. The light will shine when we focus on who Christ is. Let's stand together and pray this morning.